All right. Can I get a confirmation from Ben, either verbal or nonverbal? You're the only person I can see right now. All right. So you can see my screen? Just wave if you can see my screen.
Uh,
All right. Cool. Sweet. All right. So I thought that I would use this lightning talk to talk a little bit about the recruiting process here at Def Method and how we keep our process on track. That's the only pun that I'm using that has anything to do with this overview image. Um, what I'd like to do over the next few minutes is give you a high-level overview of each stage of our recruitment process, along with a few statistics to give you an idea of what our recruitment pipeline looks like and hopefully give you some insight from a hiring manager's perspective, should you ever find yourself going through another recruitment process. So first off, we have our application review, which I chose the Tinder image because it reminds me a lot of it. But yeah, we have our application review. This is where we parse, in many cases, hundreds of applicants before potentially moving them on to the next stage. At this stage, we are typically looking for years of experience, specific languages and frameworks, so proficiencies in specific languages and frameworks, agile experience, test-driven development experience, and attention to detail. Um, So in 2017, we had a pass rate of 44% at the application review stage, um, which I thought was pretty interesting. Once we've decided which candidates are the best fit, we then move them on to the next stage, which is the preliminary phone screen stage. So the preliminary phone screen stage is used to get a sense of how the candidates interact with people. The phone screen typically lasts somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes and normally consists of a few questions that will help us get a better sense of the candidate's specific work experience, communication skills, and what exactly they're looking for in a company. Um, in 2017, we had an acceptance rate of about 67% at the preliminary phone screen stage. And after the phone screen has been conducted, we then determine whether or not we would like to move the candidate on to the next stage of the process, which is our code challenge. The Coe Test and/or challenge is used to determine the quality of a candidate's code. The candidate is given as much time as they need to complete the exercise and is encouraged to use whichever languages or frameworks they feel most comfortable using. Candidates are graded on their ability to follow instructions, whether or not they can come up with the correct output, object orientation and clean design, quality README, simplicity of the code, and test-driven development and test coverage. The pass rate here was 18%. Once the candidate has submitted the code test, it is then graded by two of our engineers. If both engineers agree that the engineer has passed, we then move the candidate on to the next stage, which is our last and final stage, which is the one-day in-person interview. Let's see, Ben Affleck here, demanding a retainer. The in-person interview is where we get a better sense of the candidate's technical expertise, as well as how the candidate would work within a team. This is accomplished through a 1-hour technical interview and then two 1-hour-long pairing interviews. Candidates are taken through their code test and a pairing exercise to get a better sense of the candidate's processes and methodologies. And in 2017, we had a pass rate of 70% once the candidate made it to the in-person interview stage. At the conclusion of the in-person interview stage, we gather feedback from those who interviewed the candidate and make a final decision on whether or not we would like to extend the candidate an offer. So that's pretty much it. That's a high-level overview of the process. I'd like to share a few fun facts that I found while digging up these numbers. So for those of you who have not been with us for that long, our old process consisted of a technical interview and a pairing interview that were done on separate days. Since combining these interviews into a one-day interview, we've seen a 59% increase in time to hire from the Coe Test to in-person interview stage. So something like we went from something like 50 days to about 27, 28 days. We've seen a 5% decrease in the pass rate for the application review stage. We've seen a 2% decrease in the pass rate for the preliminary phone screen stage. We've seen a 13% decrease in the pass rate for the take-home coding test. So I believe it went from like 31% to 18%. And we've seen a 15% increase in the pass rate. So it's 50% increase in the pass rate for the in-person interview stage. So what does all of this tell me? This information seems to indicate that we have become increasingly selective at the top of the recruiting funnel, which has resulted in better candidates who are more capable of succeeding at the in-person interview stage. It also seems to indicate that I'm much nicer than the rest of you. Questions?
Brian, the pass rate on the code test, or does that include people that just dropped off and never gave us a code test?
It does. So I'd imagine it would be much higher if people were actually submitting them.
Cool, thanks.
I don't suppose. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, I was just gonna say or ask whether whether you know if there's a trend in terms of what about the code submission is the most common biggest pitfall, meaning what qualities of the engineers are the toughest to find at a high enough level. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest trends are one, so for those who do complete the challenge, the biggest trend is a lack of test-driven development and object orientation. And then there's definitely a little bit of subjectivity to, I guess, the level of test-driven development that we're expecting. So I'd say those are probably the biggest trends. So I'd say one thing that I'd like to do this year is do a better job of quantifying just exactly what we're looking for in terms of object orientation and test-driven development. And then for those who do not submit, it's just the idea that a lot of people don't, or a lot of engineers don't necessarily feel like they need to be submitting code tests at a certain part of their career. What a lot of engineers would prefer to do is submit a portfolio. So, I mean, it may be worth looking at other options for engineers who may be later in their career that are outside of submitting a code challenge or code test.
Hey, what I was going to say is I found it really interesting that our acceptance rate for the Coe Test is so low, and then our acceptance rate for the in-person interviews is so high.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, and I don't really suspect that we're trying to hire at a really faster rate than we are, but I'm wondering if we should examine that like maybe we're being too harsh on the Coe tests. And yeah, I don't know. If we're so accepting in the in-person interviews, maybe that's maybe we're too accepting in the in-person interviews. I don't think so, but yeah.
I mean, I don't really see that as a negative, personally. I think the fact that we're so particular during the early stages is the main reason why the acceptance rate is so high towards the end. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want it to get to a point where, we were only uh, accepting like 10% at at the code challenge stage, but then getting like 100% at the 100% acceptance at the in-person interview stage. But if anything, I'd like it to go maybe like slightly the other way, where maybe we're uh, becoming a little bit more accepting at the code challenge stage, maybe where it's like 25%, and then maybe like 60 something percent, like low 60s for the in-person interview. But at the same time, I think it's important that we're kind of weeding people out in the early stages, because the in-person interviews, they take a lot of time. They take up everybody's time. Um, so we want to make sure that the people that we're bringing in are worth the opportunity cost.
Hey, Bryant. I wanted to just chime in and provide a little bit more context
Mhm.
because these are all really good. But just for people that are looking at those percentages and wondering, hey, maybe this could be improved, or maybe this could be or increased or decreased. We grew the company by 30% last year, and we did that almost entirely through hiring through this process. And so there's definitely we're able to grow with the percentages as they are right now. The other thing to keep in mind is retention. Um,
Oh yeah.
so we've brought on a number of people. That acceptance rate of 70%, whatever it is, has provided um, a number, I don't know how many, engineers last year, none of whom we let go, and only one of whom left for her own kind of personal reasons. And so in terms of growth and retention, we're in a good place. And so then looking at those numbers, then I think for me it helps me to understand, like, oh, okay, so a healthy process looks something like this. Bearing in mind that we did make a change last year, and so
Mhm.
early last year, and so the numbers would have been shifting a little bit over the course of last year. But so I just wanted to kind of provide that. I have also one question while I'm speaking. Do you happen to know, Brian, what percentage of people accepted our offer?
I believe it was 90. It was 90, like 95, I believe, which is actually the
That's pretty
same as
good.
our, yeah, and that's the same as our retention rate. Our retention rate's also at 95 right now.
Do we know what the reasons were for people that didn't accept our offer, or is that something that just isn't discussed?
Joe, do you want to take that, or?
It's always discussed, but I'm thinking, I mean, 95% is pretty high. I'm trying to think of the people that said no to us. I mean, does Gabe count as somebody that said no?
No, he doesn't.
No, because we had
Uh,
a
yeah, we had a contract. Thomas is the only person that I can remember who said no.
promise.
Wait, Waples.
But didn't we offer him a contract to hire? In that
Was it
case, I mean,
contract? Yeah, it was contract hire. Yeah.
there was somebody where we weren't totally sold on him, and so we offered a contract to hire. It was a little bit too much, insecurity or whatever or too much risk for him to handle, and so he turned us down. Christina, just for a general, I mean, I'm always talking with candidates, so the first concern is almost always salary. Um, but we try to make the salary ranges and expectations kind of apparent up front so that we're not all the way at the end of the process and we find out I have somebody whose salary expectations are out of range with what I can offer. Um, then I honestly I hear a lot of questions. Thinking about a couple of people who I talked with at length who then did come on board. A lot of questions about the culture, about the work life, what it means to be contracting on a customer location. So people want to know that I'm not going to send them across the country or around the world. Some people want that, but that's not the kind of shop we are. And so they want to know if they live in New York that all of our jobs are going to be in New York or in that area. And because our salaries are not as high as maybe a well-funded startup, where we try to emphasize the differences, right? The 40-hour work week, the professional development time, all that other stuff. Those are typical conversations I get into with potential hires.
Any other questions?
I thought your image selection was excellent.
Oh, that means a lot. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Goodwill Hunting is always nice.
Retainer.
Okay, thanks, Bryant.
Nice job.